Real Good AI is. It's a nonprofit trying to do real good for real people in the real world with real AI. Um, and that's part of what we're probably going to talk about today. We talked to two guests who are here from the National Association of Voice Actors. We have Matthew Parham and Tim Friedlander. I hope I pronounced your names correctly. I realized I didn't go over that before we jumped into the live today. But guys, welcome. Thank you so much for joining the stream.
Awesome. That was aces, man. You got it. Yep.
Good job. Good job.
Yeah, yeah. Happy to be here.
So I, well, for me, it's left to right. That doesn't make sense for you, chat, but that's fine. We'll start with Matthew. Matthew is a sought-after voice actor, has been nominated for Society of Voice Art and Sciences awards in the past, has a lot of successful voice actor work, and notably for our purposes today is also the director of operations for NAVA, the National Association of Voice Actors. I don't know. Do you have a better intro for yourself than Matthew? I don't want to speak for you, but
Yeah, let me AI generate something real quick. But yeah, I'm a voice actor, photographer, director of operations for NAVA. Yeah, I am a musician as well. I come from the world of music, which is how I got into voice acting. And yeah, I can keep going on and on because I love talking about myself, but we'll swing it over to Tim.
yeah, our
Yeah,
other
yeah.
guest today is Tim, also a successful career in voice acting. I don't know if you can tell by his voice. Has been appeared on many things that you would probably recognize, but for our purposes, Tim is the president of NAVA, and yeah, what what would you say about yourself, Tim? What's your
Yeah,
favorite fact?
that's a good question. I'm actually music background as well. That's actually how Matthew and I know each other from a group we play in called the Urban Renewal Project. Yeah, president and co-founder of the National Association of Voice Actors, and most recently, my most recent work, I took over Daigo Dojima in the Like a Dragon series. So the last 3 games now, I've kind of picked up that mantle in that series.
Nice. I guess I have some stuff I could read, but would one of you guys want to take this question?
Yeah.
People are probably curious what exactly NAVA is. What is the
Mhm.
association? What do you guys do? Are you a union? Are you what what do you represent here today?
That is a great question. We are actually officially a social impact nonprofit. We are an advocacy association for the voiceover industry, regardless of union affiliation. So we have members who are union, non-union, and FICOR who live in right to work states. We are not a union, but we work very closely with the unions, including SAG-AFTRA, with AFTRA in Toronto, with all of the global unions and associations, and as well. Primarily, the biggest thing that's important to understand is that the voiceover industry is 80% non-union. So while the SAG-AFTRA is a phenomenal force for union voice actors, so much of the work out there is non-union, and so many people are not going to be represented by SAG-AFTRA. So that's where we come into this equation.
What he said.
Exactly.
That's a really surprising statistic to me. Is there a reason that it's like that, or can you explain a little more about the industry?
Sure. The it depends on how deep you want to get. The United States has become increasingly um, anti-union over the last 30 or 40 years, and so kind of the general um, dilution of unions has been happening across the industry. But primarily in the early 2000s, there was a commercial strike that happened. SAG-AFTRA struck in 2002 or one, and at that point, instead of a lot of these commercial companies going back and working with the union, they just went with non-union. So we actually didn't see non-union work until about the early 2000s. And so as that's happened over the last 20, 25 years, a lot of that work has just moved away from being union work because it's quicker, faster, easier sometimes to work with non-union. It's not always cheaper, but it can be quicker, easier, and faster.
Seems to be that a lot of the quote unquote entry level work is non-union. Some of your higher work that's out there, like your AAA video games, your uh, mainstay Cartoon Network series, things like that. that work is going to be mostly union, but you'll see that some quote unquote entry level stuff like ads that you might see for a major company, but on YouTube or TikTok, things like that will be non-union. And so there's just a plethora of that work available, especially with so many streaming platforms and things now.
Yeah.
It's like you said, it's not necessarily cheaper, but it can be a little quicker. And with a fast consuming media society, a lot of non-union work is just proliferating.
What he said as well. This is perfect.
Great, that makes a lot of sense.
Yep.
Oh, sorry. I don't know. I don't not actually sharing the game for you guys, but I'm currently
Oh, that's
struggling
good.
to power wash and stuff. So I'm
Nice.
Oh,
kind of trying to formulate a question and also
Nice.
power
Nice.
wash.
Nice.
I guess how when was Nava founded and what were the sort of origins of it?
Yeah, we had kind of a very specific origin story and a purpose for launching. We launched in um, the membership we opened in November of 2022. So we've only been around for about 2.5 years, but we launched specifically to make ourselves a 501c3 for tax deductible purposes for donations. Karen Gilfrey, who's our vice president, she and I had two individual groups, one in New York and one in LA, and we had been providing financial aid for our groups through COVID, and all of that money was going through our personal accounts. And so, for our purposes, we wanted to create a nonprofit that could get bigger and grow and allow for tax deductible donations. And then, very specifically during COVID, the SAG-AFTRA healthcare plans changed, and the barrier to entry to get healthcare for SAG-AFTRA actors went from $17,000 a year to around $23,000 or $24,000 a year, meaning that a lot of people lost healthcare during COVID at the most inopportune time in the world to not have healthcare. And so
Mm.
our when we launched in November of 2022, we launched with access to a national healthcare plan for freelance voice actors. So those are the two very specific purposes for the formation. And then in January, February of 2023, 11 Labs, ChatGPT, a bunch of other sites launched on the market, and we became very active in the AI discussion at that point. And, and that's
Yeah,
the
that
totality of the origin.
that makes a lot of sense.
Uh,
The AI, we're going to get to the AI discussion, but
yeah,
the healthcare thing is interesting. So you actually, I mean, you have sort of a collectively bargained health care sort of option for freelancers, right? Is the idea, and it's
yeah,
they can just
yeah.
pay to join the group, basically.
Yeah, we do have qualifications. Once you qualify to become a NAVA member, then you have access to the healthcare, which is slightly different than having an earnings requirement. We operate more like a company. So if you were to get,
Yeah,
you get a company, and after 30 days, once you're an employee of the company, after 30, 60, or 90 days, depending on the requirements, then you qualify for healthcare through that company. So we operate very similarly to that.
interesting.
Yeah. And as we know, healthcare in this country is to put it
it's great.
mildly, a disaster for most people. Yeah. So
No, no.
any options that are out there to provide people with opportunities to have another option is always a great thing to have. Yeah. 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 It's tough. Absolutely. And we also, one of the things that I think um, from a business standpoint that doesn't get discussed a lot is a lot of artists, a lot of people who want to change careers can't do so because they're going to lose their health care. Some people are stuck in relationships they don't want to be in, but they can't leave their partner or their spouse because of the health care. So we wanted to offer the ability for somebody who really wanted to be put their life and career into being a voice actor, had that option that they could leave their existing career and still have something, not lose their health insurance completely. Yep. Absolutely. Yeah. 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 I mean, I was a teacher for 9 or 10 years, and one of the reasons for teaching and staying in that profession as long as I did was because of the healthcare that came along with that, and knowing that if you leave, you're instantly lose your healthcare, or all of a sudden it's going to be 1,200, 1,500, $2,000 a month for some basic coverage. So we wanted to provide some options for that, and that's hopefully a push into um, some changes in the healthcare system that happen in this country at some point down the line.
This is not what we're here to discuss, but I'm curious. What did you teach? I didn't know you were a teacher previously. That's
Yeah. I'm a musician. I taught. My
Mhm.
background is actually I'm a classical clarinet performer. Was my original degree, and I taught orchestra and music for a decade. So,
Amanda
yep.
Amanda has
Oh,
a
so I'm a
performance degree in clarinet. Yeah.
I have
Oh,
a
you're clear. Yep.
performance
Oh,
degree.
that it.
Yep, from
That
University of Cincinnati College Conservatory of Music. Yeah,
Oh,
back in the
awesome!
days.
I was just playing my Camille Sensei clarinet sonata this weekend. Um,
Love it.
yeah, yeah,
That's
yeah.
cool.
Along, yeah.
I actually went to the University of Cincinnati as well.
Oh,
Oh yeah, I
great.
was gonna mention that in the intro. Yeah, Matthew
That's
is
hilarious.
you're West Coast now, but you're Cincy guy, and Mandy and I are actually in Cincy right now. That's where we met at UC, and that's where we live currently. So
Oh, that's awesome.
lots of cross connections here, but that's cool. I had
That's
no
great.
idea you were a clarinetist. That's really cool. We met in
Yep,
music
yep, yep.
school. I studied tuba, but I
Oh,
ended up
perfect.
switching degrees before graduating with my performance degree. But
Oh,
played in
that's
a
crazy. Yeah. Yep.
played in a funk band, and
That's it. So our
normal music school stuff.
yep, our band right now is it's a 14-piece band with a 8-piece horn section that we play
Oh, that's
hip
cool.
hip hop, funk, R&B. We sometimes have a sousaphone player,
Yeah.
but yeah, mostly bass trombone on that. Yeah, that's awesome. That is great.
Yeah, that's cool. We did one album before I moved away for grad school, and we had Bootsy Collins on our album, and I played sousaphone. I mean, he's a Cincy guy, so we just had to have a connection randomly. But
Yep, yep, yep.
yeah, that's really funny. Anyway, like I said, that's not really
Awesome.
what we're here to talk about, but that's really cool.
It's all
Funny.
all
Yeah.
related, It's all related. That's awesome.
Yeah, so you
Well, I
mentioned
guess
already.
transition. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Oh, I think I was going to do what you were just prompting, but you mentioned it wasn't part of the foundation necessarily, but right around the time Nava was founded, and explosively so in the last few years, generative AI stuff has become an issue in your industry and become something that you guys have had to talk a lot about and work on a ton, I'm sure. And like right now, we're still kind of in the phase where researchers who are developing all this new stuff are really just focused on what's novel, what can we do, what's possible, and they're not really considering, is this going to impact creative types? Is this going to impact voice actors? Is this going to impact, humans who have jobs and whatever? If you could talk to the people who are in those positions right now, what sort of advice, or I don't know, what would you ask them? What would you tell them? The people who are just putting out any new AI tech they can, regardless of the impact, regardless of the whatever ethics they may or may not uh, push the boundaries of in what they're
Yeah.
doing.
I have a few thoughts on that's a good question. I'm going to give you my thoughts. This is not something we've ever really discussed before, so I'll let Matthew have his own thoughts on this. Um, I would say that the understand that the creation of this technology doesn't exist in a bubble, and that the damages that are happening right now are instantaneously happening and affecting people currently, and that as much as we hope that this technology will change the course of humanity in the future for the better, it's very important to understand that the damage is real and it's happening now, and that the best way for this to benefit everybody going forward is for all of us to be able to work collaboratively in a way that's going to actually make this technology do what people espouse it to do, and claim that it can do. Currently, the benefits to most people are not being seen in their daily lives the way that it is intended to be seen, and that people are losing their jobs, they're losing their homes, they're losing their livelihoods, they're losing their health care, they're losing their health in some areas where they're being adversely impacted by the infrastructure that it takes to run this technology, um, and that this is not something that we are learning as artists not to live in a bubble that exists away from tech. And I think it's important that tech doesn't learns to not live in a bubble that is separated from the humanity and the artists that are the foundation of this tech. That's my thought.
Yeah.
Matthew, what do
I love that.
you got? Yeah.
Thank you for that statement. I'm sure we'll clip it. Clip it, someone in
Yeah.
chat.
Yeah.
So, thing about me is that I'm a bit outspoken, which can often get me in trouble, but often the double-edged sword is the truth as well. And so, I would say to these people that we need to be ethical and responsible in the development. I think no one wants to stifle innovation, but we also want to do it in a way that has integrity and ethics at the forefront, being human centric. Uh, because it's not just about displacing artists. Like this affects everyone, from blue collar to white collar to the creative field. It's not something that doesn't spill over. And so, is the juice really worth the squeeze? Like, just because we can doesn't mean that we should. I mean, we have all the nukes in the world. That doesn't mean that we should use them. They actually put limitations on how we engage in warfare because of that. Just because we can doesn't mean that we should. And so, if the collateral damage is people's careers, is bottoming out the economy, then is it really worth it? And what you're essentially dealing with is wealth concentration, moving billions of dollars from the creative world, from the blue collar sector, and concentrating that wealth into the hands of a few tech companies. And who does that really benefit? Because AI doesn't pay taxes. The economy is at risk, livelihoods are at risk. And so it's great that, this little startup over here might make some money, or this $1 billion industry or this $1 billion tech giant is going to make a few more millions of dollars, but at what cost? And so I think the model has been to move fast and break things. I think we should uh, move methodically and make impactful changes, not at the cost of people's livelihoods.
And I want to add on that, this discussion that a lot of times there's this mentality that artists, this is whatever capacity, musicians, filmmakers, actors, voice actors, are making a ton of money. And we aren't. The artist creative community is a blue collar working class community. It's a community that lives on minimum wage a majority of the time. The majority of our membership makes less than $25,000 a year in voiceover. There's a small fraction, as in any industry, that makes those high dollar figures. For every Spielberg or Brad Pitt or whoever you have out there, there are millions and millions of other people who are just getting by. And as artists, and most people who work in the artist community know that you wake up every day unemployed. You wake up every day looking for that next job. If you're lucky, you'll have a client that you're going to work with for a few weeks or a few months. But these are not long-term jobs. These are not a guaranteed payday every day. And the majority of us wake up, trying to find that next work. You're in the practice room practicing for 10, 12, 14 hours a day in the hopes that you can book that one gig that will pay for all of that time you spent in the practice room. You're doing auditions as voice actors 6, 7, 8 hours a day, 40 hours a week, unpaid, in the hopes that you'll book that one gig that will pay you enough to make up for the 3 weeks of that month that you didn't work. And most people don't, I think, fully comprehend what that looks like and what the reality of that existence actually is. And that all you see are the big paydays. Great. Well, video game actors get paid $1,000 for a 4-hour session. That sounds great. Wow, I'm going to go work for 4 hours and make $1,000. You might work 4 hours in an entire month. You might work 4 hours in 6 months. So that you might work 8 hours over the course of a couple of months. So that 8 hours that you work has to make up for the other 80, 90, 120 hours that you work for free that month. And the reality of that is very, very hard unless you actually experience it. And I think it's something people understand is that we're blue collar working class voice actors. We're blue collar working class artists, musicians that are out there, investing in our instruments, investing in our equipment, investing in our, computer software systems that graphic artists have to use. How much did your tuba cost? How much did your clarinets cost? How many tens of thousands of dollars have we invested in our careers over the years with no guarantee of any payday, no guarantee of making any money in any capacity. But we will continue to do it even if we don't get paid. And I think that's a huge difference. Most people would not continue to go to the office 40 hours a week if they weren't being paid. We'll continue to work. We'll continue to practice. We'll continue to play our instruments. We'll continue to get better at our craft. That's just what we love to do, and it's how we exist in the world.
Piggybacking off of that, there seems to be this inherent adversarial approach, as opposed to a cooperative approach. Like, I don't understand why ethics aren't placed at the forefront of this AI push. People talk about ethical AI, and a lot of times they're just blowing smoke. For instance, most of the voice models are collected using the foundational models are built on scraped data from copywritten material or just from people's YouTube videos or Instagrams. And like these are people's voices who have never consented. They never opted into this. And they're being used for these companies to make billions of dollars. So it's like nothing has been ethically data collected at all. And then I don't understand why we're in such a rush to replace the artist in society as opposed to other things. Like I would much prefer AI to do my taxes than to make art for me. Like, and we came out of the pandemic where all we had was art for survival. We were all locked in our houses for months on end, some of us years. And what do? We turned to art to verily save our lives. We consumed books and TV shows and movies and music and animation. We turned to the arts in our greatest time of need as a collective humanity. And then to turn around and come out of that experience and have a mad dash to replace artists doesn't make any sense to me. And so that's what I would say to these AI tech people in the world. It's just like, why, bro? Just why?
Great. So I want to talk to let's just enumerate things a little bit more distinctly here. You've mentioned a few ethical issues of this area, and I really want to make them very explicit for our viewers so that they can understand your perspective, and maybe we can add some from our science perspective
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
So you've talked about the loss of human creativity and the loss of human jobs. You've talked about unethically sourced data. What are the other ethical aspects of AI in voice acting that particularly concern you?
When it's the other aspect that's kind of um, maybe not fully discussed is control. This idea that we have some control over what our voice is going to say, and this ability to approve my voice for a product in a certain area that says certain things without giving up the ability for my voice to say anything. And we look at this in a couple different areas. So let's look at politics. If I get hired as a voice actor to go and read a political script, I show up to a session and they give me a script that is for a candidate that I oppose or a candidate that I don't agree with, I as a human can walk out of that session. I'll lose the job, I won't get paid, but I still have that autonomy to leave. If my AI voice does not have that ability to walk out of a session if it's given a script that it doesn't agree with. And so I potentially, as a voice actor, could find myself in a campaign where I am voicing two sides of the campaign. I'm voicing a candidate I don't approve of, while the human version of me is voicing for a candidate that I do approve of. If we're talking about commercial work exists in a very unique sphere in the industry, is that there is exclusivity. And it's this idea of exclusivity is that if I'm hired for example, to be the voice of BMW, I legally, according to my contract, cannot be the voice of any other car company during that time. Now, if I don't have control over what my AI voice says, it's possible that my AI voice gets bought up by Mercedes, Ford, Chevy, Dodge, whatever. And now my voice is the voice of a competing car company. Multiple people are legally now on the hook for that. So I, as the voice actor, now have competition with this. The company that bought that voice now is potentially going to be sued by the other company that already owns the exclusivity to that voice print for that. The company in the middle that generated that may not have realized that they didn't have the rights to generate that voice. The producer that bought that voice may not have understood they didn't have the rights to that because of the exclusivity. So you have this chain of legal liability all the way through that process that becomes very, very difficult to navigate. Versus, let's actually talk to the voice actor. Let's tell them exactly what they want their voice to be used for. Let's come up with a fair agreement and a fair terms and know that this voice actor has the control over what their voice says so that none of us in this entire chain end up in legal quagmire or an area where a voice actor has their voice used without their permission. Those are the two concrete areas. And then kind of a more esoteric approach to this is that whenever we license out our voice, we're licensing the performance. We're saying you get these words in this performance to be used for this product for this period of time on this medium. It doesn't give you the right to take my voice print and extract it from that performance to create wholly new performances. And those two things a lot of times don't get clearly delineated a lot of times. And we've seen this multiple times where a producer or an engineer or audio engineer has said, oh, hey, by the way, I needed some pickup. So I just threw your voice into 11 labs and changed the words around and created a new read for you. And the talent is like, wait, hold on a second. So what did you do with my voice? Where is my voice now? Is it in this system that I don't have control over? What terms did you sign over when you put that voice into a platform that now my voice, I am now beholden to those terms of service? What's going to happen to it? Is it publicly available? Is it privately available? Can it be used to generate new content going forward? These are all the concerns that we have, that the instinct is to say, then don't use my voice for AI at all, because there's so many concerns about it, as opposed to, hey, here's a voice actor. Let's talk to them and let's have a discussion with them about how we can all work together to create an AI version of their voice, a synthetic version of their voice that we all can use safely through the entire chain of this production.
I would even posit that
that's the long version.
That was the extra long version. I would say that it goes even beyond voice acting, that every American citizen should be concerned about this, because control matters when you're dealing with a voice actor who has exclusivity, but control also matters with anyone, because it makes especially the elderly population extremely vulnerable to scams. And we're seeing this more and more and more, where the FCC has had to at least talk about the issue. I don't know if any solutions have come down the pipeline yet, but we have so many boomers out here getting scammed with AI voices of their grandchildren or their children, calling saying like, hey, Ma, it's me. I need the 4 digits of your social security number. They don't hesitate because the sound of a voice is so unique and such identifiable signature, and it's biometric data that they trust it. And that's the power of the voice, the inherent trust. And so, it sounds cool when you have this new AI that's forever memories, and you can upload a voice of your deceased person and have their voice live forever. That's cool until, that person died of lung cancer. Now that you hear their voice doing cigarette ads. You know what I mean? Like that's the risk here. And no one's talking about the other side of the coin. We're just espousing the benefits, but no one's really identifying the risks that come with it. Doom and gloom. Team.
Right. Well, so just from a technical side, I'm very curious, because you are all talking about voices as though they are these absolute unique fingerprints. I'd like to hear more information from you about like what specifically you listen to, or like what we could maybe use as identifying markers. For example, this is a really difficult problem to like prove you stole my voice, because we mathematically things don't line up. But if you listen, you're like, oh, I can hear that it sounds like them. Can you speak to some of these markers that we should maybe be looking into, like incorporating into the science side of detection of these sort of frauds?
Yeah, I mean that's a great it's a great question. We've been you can look at voice biometrics for bank systems that are able to identify people from those voices. I know those are, one part of a biometric system. We've been working for the last couple of years with a couple of companies to be able to match synthetic voices to the human voice that they came from. But there are, there is voice forensics. There are people who analyze voice prints and voice sounds for patterns of inflections and prosody and tone and pitch and um, the way that the voice, the physical mask that a person has, that the way their tongue is built, the way their teeth are shaped, that you can hear very specifically in certain people's voices. And then depending on some researchers that you talk to, you will find those who are of the full belief that a voice print is as singular and unique as a fingerprint, and that you can identify through technology or through the forensic analysis of this that would allow you to identify the voices that these came from. Now, the inverse of this is that you have people whose entire career is to be voice matches and mimics. And so it is possible to fool somebody by listening into determining, to not knowing whether it's the original person or the voice mimic. So this is an entirely new area that we have to navigate and figure out. But what I would say is that, in the very simplest point of this, is that if your spouse, your parent, your mom, your dad calls and says, "Hi, honey, it's me," you know in a split second whether it's that person. And if it's synthetic or human, you're not going to know, because you are instinctively know the sound of this person's voice. It is so ingrained in your brain, in your soul of who they are, that you don't question something that sounds like somebody else if you've heard them forever. The longer they talk, you may hear patterns in the way that they talk. They wouldn't say something, they might say something different. There's certain words that we know, that we've heard somebody say a million times, that they say a certain way. For example, I'll use an example for myself, is that the word BOTH. If you were to put that, and this is actually the question for everybody on this, how do you say the word BOTH?
Both.
I got both.
Is there
Okay.
an L in it, or is there not an L in it? Isn't that
So-
the question?
That's the question. So I always say, I have always said both with an L in it. And
Mhm.
somebody called me out on it in a session 2 years ago and said, and they kept telling me I was saying it wrong. I'm like, I'm not, how, this word is both. How do you say this? We had a whole discussion. But if you put my voice into an AI generator, I've done this, it pronounces the word BOTH without the L, but I, as the human, pronounce it as the L. So if I ever hear that in a system, if I hear my synthetic voice version of a voice and I hear it say BOTH without the L, I know that that is not something that I said personally. If somebody who knows me would know that that would be a word. So, and now the question is for this question then is, and if it doesn't say an L in there, is it really my voice? It didn't say an L, but it sounds like me.
Right.
So is it really my voice, right?
Right.
And this becomes where I don't think that we have an answer for this. I don't have an answer for it, other than to say that we need transparency. We're hoping for some kind of fingerprinting or hashing or watermarking embedded in our audio files to know where our audio files are, and to know what happens with those, to be able to trace us back to the source. Those are all the things that we're working on, and the technology exists to do these things. If this AI technology can change the course of humanity, it can keep a spreadsheet of the voices that are in its system. So I think we have that ability to do that. It's something that's not easy. It's not going to be easy. It's not going to be quick, but I think it is something that we can do, and I believe we should do.
Right. And just on that point, just to explain it a
Yeah.
little bit more, the reason that we don't have this from like a technical science standpoint is because so they throw just as much data as they can into the input, and the model is, you may have heard, a black box. They actually don't
Yep.
know how they work.
Yep.
And this is
Exactly.
part of what we're like trying to fight against at Real Good AI. We use models that
Yeah.
are explainable, that can give
Mhm.
attribution, can determine how they came to solutions. But it's a type of model called a neural network, and they're so
Yeah.
complicated with so many layers, and you're really overtraining things to where you're fitting, like, if you're fitting data through a line, you need at least 2 points to know what that line's supposed to look like. They're basically fitting the equivalent of a line to 1 point. So they have actually no idea what is going into the answer that they're giving you. So their argument is it's some amalgamation of everything. It's no singular voice, but they also can't prove that it isn't. And that's the
Yep.
part that
Yep.
where I get hung up on this, is that you can't actually determine when you don't have that interpretability of this
Yeah. Absolutely. And we've been hearing this, for years now. There's, it's this black box, and there's just this acceptance that we are okay not understanding how something works, but we're still going to let it determine the course of the future of humanity. And that, that's a scary, that is a scary concept, you
Right.
know, essentially. But yeah, we hear
Transparency.
something, transparency. And it's, like we fully accept the fact that we are 10, 20, 30 years too late to this conversation. We understand that, that Siri and Alexa and everything is, is based on a LibreVox data set that no single person ever agreed to be in. That the very first kind of voice foundational model was created from public domain audiobooks that people recorded that are 100 years old. So even these original voices are, not only are they not going to be, the quality necessarily isn't great, but they're also trained on public domain text. So that means that nothing in that data set is newer than 100 years old. So we're using outdated terms and outdated language and outdated symbology and however you want to talk about it in to train these data sets. They're not current. And so we've been working with multiple companies to try and help build foundational models that were fully sourced, traceable, trackable. But so much of the audio we know is out there and is in system that is being used and could potentially, be used without our permission, without our consent, or without our control. And we understand that, and that's what we're trying to work towards, mitigating the damage that comes from that.
Great. So this conversation sort of reminds me of a specific example that was sort of in the central news recently, in the past year or so, where OpenAI was trying to voice their assistant, and
Mm.
they tried to get Scarlett Johansson, and then they couldn't get Scarlett Johansson, and then they got someone who sounded kind of like her, and then it came out, and everyone was like, "Oh, well, obviously that's Scarlett Johansson," but it really wasn't. Can you talk about like your sort of take on this news story and how that's relevant to you?
Yeah, I mean, we,
Okay.
we, we were we were pretty closely involved in that. When that came out, this goes to kind of the idea of identifiable voices. Is that I think 3 or 4 people that we know were had people reach out to them that morning, say, "God, I just heard that you're the new voice. That new voice of ChatGPT sounds just like you." And so not only Scarlett Johansson, but 3 of our friends, people thought it was them as well. Um, the issue really in this one is not so much that it sounded like her, but that Sam Altman implied that it was her. And that was where really kind of the issue became into it. 'Cause if you listen to those two back and forth, you can identify that it's not Scarlett Johansson. We honestly, we know for a fact that they didn't get Scarlett Johansson, that it wasn't her voice. They didn't take her voice. They worked with, another voice actor for a few years, building that before it came out. But it sounded enough like Scarlett Johansson, and it was implied that it was Scarlett Johansson. But it also sounded like our Vice President Karen Gilfrey, and it sounded like another friend of ours, Gina, and it sounded like another friend of ours, somebody else who people thought it was them. Um, so it becomes the real, the real danger in this is that they were able to show who that's they were able to trace that back to a single person for this particular voice, but not all voices are traceable back to a single person. And
It
this
really it
became,
really influences on the right of publicity comes into effect too,
and this
because no one gets to no one gets to to make money and advancements off of the perceived value of your voice. But not everyone, like you were saying, Tim, is not in that position to cause such a ruckus like Scarlett was. And there's another friend of ours who I don't know if I should drop their name, but their voice actually was used. Um, the brother who looks like me with the glasses and he got involved and this agent came to us. You remember that one? Yeah. So,
Yeah, yeah,
you know,
yeah,
so
yeah.
we had a friend of ours whose voice, he did no work with this company, with OpenAI at all. And they sourced his voice from another person who got it from another company. And so then his voice files ended up in this, and he was used as the premier voice for this campaign. Zero consent, zero control, zero compensation. And so sometimes it is literally a one-to-one theft like that. And that's used in these people's marketing platforms, and they stand all the benefit of this. And so provenance and transparency is just it's got to be part of the conversation. Like the guardrails have to be built at the same time that the highway is built. Ooh, that's a
Yeah,
new
there we go.
one.
Nice. There you go. And along those, the same lines, this is trying to educate voice actors as well on this to understand that, if we're working with a tech company, that tech company may get sold to another company. Along with that goes our audio files, and along with that goes the transfer of rights for that agreement. And though that transfer may change the rights that this company has with my voice. So these audio files go through the entire chain. We don't know where they are. We don't know where they end up. We don't know how they're going to be used. But a contract we signed 10 or 15 years ago gave up those rights. And so people are going back and saying, God, what job did I do 10 years ago that I got paid $100 for that said TTS on it, that said machine learning, that said training some system to help learn and understand language better? Where are those audio files now? Where are they going to come out? And I'll use an example of this, and this is kind of an example of I identified a person and actually put this I actually testified to this in the Lovo lawsuit with Paul and Linnea, and you can look this up; it's public record. But this couple had done a job through Fiverr 5 or 6 years ago, and the person that hired them had either hidden or not disclosed that they were working for an AI company. They got hired, they took those files, they then sold those files to another AI company, which then sold them to another AI company. And they ended up becoming the identifiable brand voice of Lovo. And in this case, a few of us came in to identify that voice, and there were very specific ways that Paul speaks, that because of the shape of his tongue, he says certain words and certain things a certain way. And this AI mimicked that particular physical attribute that he has with his tongue, that multiple of us picked up, that we could hear that the back of his tongue, it sounds bigger than the front of his tongue, is how a few of us described it. And that was consistent through this AI voice. And he was able to track that back to those audio files all the way back to the source of where he originally recorded those. But in this case, that's how we were able to, that's how multiple of us identified this as being a match of his voice, of these kind of very specific characteristics.
Right. So then I want to talk a little bit about like the contracts that you're being asked to sign.
Yeah.
Your industry is so competitive, right? And so it's sort of like a David and Goliath story that you're vying for these jobs and you'd like to make rent this month, but then you're being asked to give up these rights in probably many of these contracts just as like a catch-all that the companies are offering. What can you do about that, and do you have any success stories to share about that side of it?
Yeah. I'll jump in on this one.
Thank you.
As I do. One of the things that we've seen for years, this is not uncommon to see, is the phrase "in perpetuity, across the universe, in all technology, now or forever to be invented." You sign over your voice to this company in perpetuity, across the universe, and for all technology, now or forever to be invented. Many of us have seen these things in our agreements, and you're like, okay, well, whatever. What are they going to do? Like, nobody ever considered AI, that you can actually clone my voice, as technology that we would see in our lifetime, that we would see into the extent that it's shown up in the last couple of years. So it's looking for those terms. It's understanding that you as the voice actor are one half of this agreement. You don't have to accept what they give you. You can say, great, I'm going to cross out this, this, and this, and we'll go back to you. And you may lose the job, yes. You may also get the protections in place that you want, but if you're educated and you are able to see what potential damages are in place in this contract, you for yourself can advocate for yourself and say, no, I don't feel comfortable signing this contract. I need to turn this job down for the safety of my career going forward. We say this kind of term of don't let your next job be your last job. Don't let your first job be your last job. If you sign over your voice to a company in the very first job you ever do, there's potential that if the agreement isn't good, you've lost the ability to make a living as a voice actor going forward. So you have to look for those agreements. The very first thing that we did in early 2023 was released to the public what we call the NAVA AI synthetic voice writer, which is an addendum that you as a voice actor, that any voice actor, and actually at this point any artist, regardless of what you work in, can add to a contract that says you cannot use these audio files to create a synthetic version of my voice or for machine learning. And then there's other parameters in there. It's 4 points. It's a single page, and it just puts in place. Let's just at least stop right now and say, great, I'll do this job. You cannot use my voice for anything other than what we are agreeing to right now. No AI, no synthetic voices, no training, no cloning. But if you would like to, let's have a discussion about what we can do going forward and how we can do this safely. But at the very least, let's just stop this in its tracks and make sure we're very, very clear that this recording I'm giving you can only be used for this very specific single purpose and not for AI.
So I have a question that goes along with everyone that the contracts and everything else. We were talking about the everyday person needing to worry about this. Is there any advice you'd give for content creators that are on Twitch or anything else? Because their voice is out there, and a lot of them end up going into voice actor roles and stuff like that, or at least trying to get into that industry. So what should they be looking for other than all the resources on your site and everything else?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. Matthew, you want to take that one, or you want me to jump in on that? My thoughts. I got my thoughts. You got your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I have my thoughts from the content creator side. They're just as vulnerable as everyone
Yeah.
who's just has audio online. From your mother, father, nieces, everyone on Facebook and Instagram. Like, I will put them in the same bag. People on Twitch making content. That's where the civilian is at risk just as much as the artist. We're all in it together, and there's really no separation. And I think they're even more vulnerable because they don't have the opportunity to engage in contractual discussion to make sure that they have the NAVA AI writer attached to their file or to their contract and kind of protect themselves. So I would recommend that they push for federal legislation, which is what we do at NAVA. We go to DC. We're going in 3 days back to DC for a week of meetings with senators, representatives, and lawmakers. And we're pushing specifically for the No Fakes Act, which would allow each person the federal intellectual property right for their name, image, voice, and likeness. That is something that we're all going to need, whether you're artist or content creator or what have you. And then if you are inspiring to transition from content creation into voice acting, I'm going to go on a tangent here. But I think people need to change their mindset first. 9 out of 10 people approach me and say, how do I get into voice acting? Not how do I become a voice actor, but how do I get in, as though it's like a market to crack or you know what I mean, a racket to bust into. No one ever asks a doctor like, hey, yo, how'd you get into being a doctor? Like, it doesn't, how'd you get into being a chef? Like, no one, because there's a understood implication of work that's required. And training and studying. And I think the same thing applies to voice acting. The operative word is acting. Voice is completely secondary. And so I would recommend people study the craft, study acting, take classes, coach. Don't become a career student, but understand the industry in which you want to work, because it is not just a matter of having a cool microphone and my voice sounds cool, so I should be a voice actor. That's like, oh, you're pretty, you should be winning an Oscar for acting. Like that, there's a big difference between the two. And so just understanding the gap between talking and acting will be the first step in order how to get into voice acting.
Yeah, and then I'll touch on the kind of terms of service and contractual things in there. It's very important to understand what the platforms you're using, what rights you're giving up when you record something, right? And it's nothing that any of us ever want to actually read. Nobody wants to read 300 pages of terms of service on your iPhone when you activate it. Nobody wants to read the terms of service on your Twitch account when you sign up for it. But we've seen this in various areas. We've seen if it, anybody saw some recent chatter about SoundCloud where they had a part of their clause allowed them for AI and machine learning. They came out a couple of days later and clarified what that term actually meant. There's been multiple sites that have terms of service that have either not clarified the use of AI or that have explicitly said they're going to use the audio files uploaded to their system to train their system. Now, training is such a black box term as well. Could that training potentially become a public facing product? Does it actually make the system? Does it improve the system in some capacity, or does it become a product they can sell on the other side? And knowing what happens with that, one of the things that I think that I really like about what YouTube has done is that early on, I believe this was 2 years ago, they actually have the ability for a takedown notice if you find a synthetic version of your voice on the website or on YouTube somewhere. You can put that into place. They put kind of early on the ability to protect your voice. You have to provide proof. It's kind of like the DMCA takedown notice, but they do at least offer some ability for you as a person to have your voice removed or at least contested if you find it to be synthetically or AI generated.
That's very cool. How does that, do you know what the process looks like when you have to prove that it's your voice?
Yeah, on YouTube they have it's actually not it's not a terribly it's like a 3 or 4 step process. You can't contest for somebody, you have to contest yourself, so you have to be the person contesting it. And you have to be able to provide you have to be able to pinpoint specifically where in the content it's being used, where in the video it's being used, and then provide as much proof as possible of the source audio that it came from, which becomes very difficult. I know a few people who have contested it and used it. And so far from what I know, I think it's been a 50-50 chance of getting it removed and being rejected. But there is something there. So there's at least this acknowledgement that this is a concern and they're trying to provide some way for you to protect yourself. And hopefully as the technology improves, you can say, great, this is a watermark. This came from 11 Labs. Watermarks are audio files that are generated. So if you put an audio file back into 11 Labs, it can tell you if it was generated at 11 Labs. And then from there, 11 Labs can tell you who generated it and what audio file they used for that. But that's, you have to then track down, you hear a synthetic version of your voice. Well, which of the hundreds of platforms did somebody use to create that model or that synthetic version of your voice? How do you track that down? And if they use it on a certain platform, can you even watermark it or track down where it came from? So this kind of this idea of, if you're talking about something like Nightshade or Glaze that Ben Zhao has created that has, fingerprints or identities within those images to be able to either stop the ingestion or to be able to mess up the ingestion of that, so that at the very least an audio file, if it gets thrown into a system, will come out sounding different than you, so there won't be a one-to-one clone of your voice being made. That still does add then competition to the marketplace. Now you have a completely unique voice that doesn't sound like anybody, that's not traceable or identifiable as a single person. Now you've created a different problem, which is added competition into an already competitive market. So
I have a question for you, smart AI science people. What are your thoughts on models collapsing and corruption and obsolescence? Because there's only X amount of data available for scraping, and most of these models have already scraped up everything that's online. And so then you have models cannibalizing themselves by training on content that they generated, which deteriorates the quality of the output, which then in turn puts a premium on new human generated content, which therefore is of more value and may be opted for. What's your thoughts on that?
So the type of model that they use, called the neural network, is the type of model that is very data hungry. And so we've run into this in other areas of the work. So my area that I came from is like using AI type things for like science applications. And so oftentimes in like those applications you have very limited data. And so what the industry did, I mean in AI and has been doing is exactly what you're describing, where it tries to play with itself, where it tries to say, well, can I create new ones that look like these things that I already have? And you can actually track, and they have tracked this degradation over time. Now, what the policy part of what you're getting at, I'm not as clear about how it relates to putting new data in as like a premium. So I would like to ask you clarification on that part of the question.
Yeah, it was just more so like an esoteric question. Like, okay, if we have model degradation and these models are playing with themselves, whoa, um, then by default, the inverse would mean that I guess there's more of a premium placed on new human generated content. If the models become unreliable or they're kind of devolving, then I guess you need a booster shot essentially of human content, and so that would come at a higher cost, I would imagine. And then at what point does that just become a better alternative than this model, which is collapsing?
Well, I think a good point at this is it's not like a model. People think that models like reach a point and then the next point you start from exactly the point where you left off and you keep going. That's not necessarily the case. So some models, right? So they stand on the shoulders of models that already exist, and that's a thing called transfer learning in machine learning, where they say it worked really good in that application, and so let's use it here. One famous example of this is like they were looking at like textures of bread or something, and they were trying to identify, and they accidentally found that it like identified cancer really well or something, right? So that's like one example where they took something that was trained and they're putting it in a completely different context. But it's the same idea. When a new iteration of a model comes out, they can either choose to stand on the shoulders of what exists and start from that place and sort of tweak, or they can think about totally retraining from the beginning and excluding any of that like self-made data. And so I think the way that most of the scientists deal with this is there's like a limit to so like for some point, I think including playing with itself, if you will, improves the accuracy, but absolutely there's a breaking point. And so my guess is that they've done this and like built these models so many times that they tend to know where those breaking points are, and they try and stay away from that total degradation. So it's not a matter of like injecting new stuff, but with like using the right proportions of real versus fake type data. But if we want things to stay modern, you pointed this out, a lot of these that are in these open data sources, I mean, they'll continue to scrape. If there's no regulation, if there's no reason that they can't do this, there's nothing that stops them from doing this in many contexts right now. So I think that's why we want to take this out of the hands of these big tech companies, because that's sort of their prerogative, is just to scrape. I need more data, let's go get more data, right? So there's never an issue there for them. And I actually think that that's the main reason that these tech companies are going after these applications that seem so art based and are really the wrong applications of AI, because again, we want it to do our taxes and not to do our art for us. But it's easier for them to just access and get the amazing amount of data that is out there on, let's say, the human voice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Masturbation.ai. No one's bought that domain. Look that up.
Yeah, imagine why not. So
Evolution. Yeah.
to this point, we've talked about all the negative aspects of AI, especially in this space. I do want to balance this with, there are some applications where one could imagine that this might make a positive influence in the future. And I know that this is going to be more controversial to you all, but I really want to understand your perspective on these things. So, like, the first case that I can consider is for like accessibility and
Yeah.
disabilities in general. So, losing your voice. There's
Yeah.
a scenario people give where, like, if you're losing your voice, you could record it and theoretically keep your voice in an AI sense. Um, I guess with that, or that like in social media, like if it's something where you would never hire a voice actor to do something silly that you're just making your own personal social media, would it be okay to use these sort of things to maybe generate an AI of your own voice, just to save yourself time, to make it accessible so that people can hear something along with the reading, so it might be more reachable? Are those
Oh
sort
yeah.
of applications, how do you feel about those, I guess?
Yeah, I got big thoughts on this one. One of the things that we didn't state up front, is like none of our approach is anti-technology or anti-AI. We are, I'm a child of the '80s. I grew up on, my Atari 2600. I remember the first time I got a computer in the classroom. I remember the first time I got a watch that played video games. Like technology is, and ingrained in this idea that technology is always an improvement, and it's always something better, and it's always something that can make lives better, is something that I have grown up with. I remember the first time going into getting Pro Tools or going into a digital. The first time I could loop a drum or create a sample of something. I mean, it's phenomenal. And there are lots of places where this technology is applicable and can be used. You're talking about accessibility, absolutely. Putting out a news article that is accessible for in every single language that somebody can listen to the moment that it's released, that it's printed, and that it's published is a great technology. If all the voice is being used, consent, control, and compensation, and they know. If you're taking your own voice and you want to synthesize your own voice, absolutely, you have that right to do that. We think every voice actor has the right, if they want to create a synthetic version of their voice and engage with these companies. It's right now, there's such a power differential that puts the voice actor or anybody who wants to create a synthetic version of their voice at risk and somewhat powerless. One of the things we talk about a lot is, as you mentioned just now, is this ability to protect and save your own voice and archive your own voice. Randy Travis is a great example of this, where he's created a synthetic version of his voice. If you look at languages that are being lost, let's go around the world and save and store these languages and archive these languages so that we can continue to create new content in these languages when the original speakers are dying off. That's happening currently. We talk also about the ability to do pickups, authorized pickups. I mentioned earlier how engineers have just created pickups without the knowledge or the approval of the voice actor. But the voice actor, from the other side, you're on a plane, you have a client who needs a pickup. You can say, great, throw it into and generate a couple of words, send them back a file, which is something many of us have done. And you can service your client. The client gets what they need. The product goes to air as quickly as it needs to go. We talk a lot about the licensing something, for example, to the New York Times. If New York Times wants to license my voice so that my voice reads the New York Times cover to cover at the moment that it's printed every day, that's a very viable opportunity to do that, as long as it's done with the consent, control, approval, and the full transparency of the voice actor whose voice is being used. And this is just multiple ones of these. You have I've heard of stories of kids who are nonverbal, where they've taken a sibling and their parents' voices and created a blended voice that would be the best approximation of what they think this kid would sound like, and they can now speak through with a synthetic version or an AI generated version of their voice. So there's definitely lots of possibilities. And lots of ways that this can be done in partnership with the voice actors and with with people who want to have their voices generated. That's something that can absolutely be done. Um, but
Yeah.
I'm gonna stop on the word because that's where I'm gonna leave that one.
I would agree with every point Tim made, in that when we get sick as voice actors, like I have a synthetic voice that was built ethically from the ground up with a foundational model that was ethically sourced as well, and it's very nifty for things like efforts in video games when developers might want scratch track, and typically they might, grab the intern or someone who is making faxes or copies and have pull them into the booth and have them do some efforts and screams and stuff just to kind of have a voice there. Now that there's an opportunity for the actual voice that you want for that role, the AI version of that voice to be heard and done that. So that's a passive income opportunity. Like Tim says, for accessibility, that's a huge part of it as well. It's fantastic. There's so many chat bots that didn't have voice options that now can have voice opportunities as well. But I would want that company that's going to make so much money using that voice to have ethically sourced it, and the person whose voice it belongs to, or the people who comprise that voice data, to be compensated when their data is going to be used to make this company money. And so it's massive opportunities with, like Tim was saying, with a power dynamic that's more level. And as far as just the concept of AI and art, uh, as I mentioned, this is something that affects every person in America that has their voice online. It's not just about voice actors are upset. Like, this is bigger than that. This is about every person in America who has their voice online, owning that voice, having the rights to control it, so that it's speaking the words that they want to speak, endorsing the candidates that they want to endorse. And it's not about us being concerned about our livelihoods. I'm gonna be okay. Like, I have money from other avenues as well. Like, no one goes to school for voice acting, gets a PhD in voice acting, and now we're just minted voice actors for life. Like, we have other things going too. So it's not a fear. It's about respect for art and the spirit. And so, like, I don't want to watch AI generated movies. I don't want to listen to AI generated music. I don't want to look at AI generated photography. It's not just a concern about, oh, I've tied my livelihood to this concept. Like, no, I don't want the human condition that generates art to be bastardized by AI. And there's no such thing as gatekeeping in the VO world, because I am the key. How can you keep me out the gate when I am the key? Like, gatekeeping doesn't really exist. So I just kind of want to reframe some of those conversations that I often see in the community.
I think that's an interesting connection too. I think there are a lot of people who will have a conversation about data privacy on the internet, and we'll talk about, like, oh yeah, I deleted my Facebook, or I made my social media private or whatever, because I don't want companies to have my data. I don't want them to know where I shop or what I do, even when it's stuff that you post online willingly like that. And I think a lot of those same people who understand, at least in some way, maybe they're misconceptions, but they understand on some level, like, I'm concerned about my internet data privacy, will then also not understand kind of what you're saying, that, like, if you're online in videos, if your voice is online somewhere, that is another type of data that you have. But and they don't see that in the same way, because they're like, well, I'm not a voice actor. That But
Right.
it's exactly what you guys have talked about in various contexts today. I think that would connect to a lot of people, because I do think, and I'm sure you've get this, I think people hear this discussion and they're like, oh, artists are just worried they're gonna lose jobs. I don't want to pay an artist if I can just get an AI thing for free. Artists are just moaning because they're worried they're gonna lose a little bit of money or something. But like, I do think there's some level of understanding, even from people who are not tech savvy, that, like, yeah, your internet, your data that is on the internet is obviously valuable to companies. There's a reason you don't have to pay to use social media websites, because the value comes from the data that you're giving them willingly. That does include your voice. That does include, it includes more than just your GPS data and your purchases on Amazon or whatever. And I think that I obviously, it hadn't occurred to me maybe in that context, but I think a lot of people might see it differently, connecting those sort of concerns.
Yeah, I agree. It's different when when you think it's just artists. It's like, okay, they don't care when it's artists at risk or being vulnerable, but it's all fun and games until your mom's twerking on a Hooters commercial with her voice and her likeness. Like, you know what I mean? Like, there's nothing stopping these people from, from scraping that. You know what I mean? Like, it's possible to just generate that. Like, and so when people understand it at a base visceral level, like, wow, I don't want pictures of my deceased grandmother being used to prop up to sell a product that I don't care about. Like when people understand it's that real, then they kind of understand like, oh, this affects more than just artists. This affects every American citizen.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So we have an
and
interesting chat question. Sorry.
yeah. Oh yeah, no,
Um,
go for, yeah. Let's get the chat question. Then I want to touch back on something that Matthew had said earlier.
Perfect. It's really related to what you were saying, so that's why I wanted to jump in. So
Yeah.
the AI, and you're describing some AI sources that are more ethically sourced for the voice actors. Is there any way, as a consumer, that they can verify that that was more with consent as opposed to an unethical version of AI?
I'm going to lay out this as a very blanket statement. There are on the market currently no ethical AI voice companies that we consider to be out there right now. We're part of Ed Newton Rex's fairlytrained.org coalition, and there is not a single voice company yet that has been ethically sourced because of this data set that they all use. They use the LibriVox data set, which we don't consider to be ethically sourced. And unfortunately, that is the foundation of every single voice model on the planet currently. Google, Alexa, Google, Amazon, Microsoft, 11 Labs, everybody uses this LibriVox data set. And so currently on the market, there are no what we would consider to be ethically sourced AI voice companies with ethically sourced foundational models. There are many that are working ethically on the output side of things to try and work with voice actors. The only ones that are currently um, kind of really fully clear and transparent in that are two companies, one which is narrative.ai and the other one is ethovox.ai. Both have agreements with SAG-AFTRA to follow SAG-AFTRA regulations and contract requirements. You will find reference to a company called Replica Studios, which was in Australia, I believe. They actually, unfortunately, just went out of business about 2 weeks ago. But you will see them in this in the same discussion as Ethovox, Narrative, and Replica Studios. But that's currently where we sit. We are working with multiple companies to try and help change that. But as of now, that's where we sit with that.
Thank you. Chat says thank you.
Okay, awesome. And then I did want to reference because Matthew said this a couple of times. He said in America a couple of times, and I just want to reference for anybody who's not in America why that is such a big deal. The United States does not have, as you mentioned, data privacy. We don't actually have protections on a federal level for our biometric data, the way that they do in most other countries. You have GDPR in in Europe. You have Brazil has some biometric protections. Canada has some biometric protections. In the United States, our voice, image, name, and likeness does not have the same basic biometric protections that you have in most other countries. So that's why we refer specifically to America, because that's where our focus is right now, to get these base protections in place to at least get us to the basic protections that most other countries already have in place.
It's kind of surprising to me. I actually didn't know that. I
Is it surprising
Did-
though? Really?
I mean,
Hey,
on a certain level, no, but
Right. So like if it's tied to something else
Sure.
medical,
if
everything.
it's medical,
Yeah.
absolutely, you're correct.
Okay.
But just our biometric data, our voice print, our image, our name, our likeness on a federal level, just in general, every day. You're actually right. HIPAA is so we're trying to get DIPA, so digital and whatever offer protections in place, right? Or this is through the No Fakes Act right now, which would create basic protections on a federal level. There are 13 states that have some protections, but if you don't live in that state, do you have protections? Or if you work with a company who is in that state, do you have protections? These are things that we don't know. That's not clear and is something that we're trying to get into place. Because then once you have basic protections, then we can actually discuss how do we enforce those, and then what control do I have with my voice? And those who then want to synthesize their voice or allow their voice to be used somewhere, they know fully that they are going to have these certain protections in place, and these certain protections won't be in place. So that's where we're just trying to get to that very basic level right now.
I have immensely enjoyed this stream, and I thank you so much for having us on. I must head to another meeting at 12:30. I hate to be that guy, but
No,
I'm
I
that
was
guy.
just gonna say we definitely want to respect your guys' time. I know that we're already a little bit over what we had agreed up front on. So if you
Yeah.
guys have to head out, if you want to say anything in closing, or if there's anything you want to promote or talk about, please go ahead. But we don't want to keep you into any other obligations.
No, I actually I have a session. I have to go to a voiceover session. I booked a job, so I gotta go. I gotta go do that in a few. I'm just I'll leave on on this note is that I say this kind of frequently is that I've become more hopeful in the last year and a half to 2 years as we've progressed through this. I felt when we first started in early 2022 pretty hopeless that this was kind of a lost cause, that these companies were too big, they were too powerful, they had too much money, that we as independent artists, as voice actors, as blue collar artists, as the working mom and pop industry that is an artistic industry, were already done with, and it was over. It was a lost cause. But as we're having discussions like this, as we're having discussions with people who are thinking differently and thinking outside of the bubble, and as we as actors start to think outside of the artistic bubble and into the tech bubble as well, that I feel more hopeful, and that we can find something in this world that will allow these two things to coexist in a way that doesn't destroy the other.
Yeah, I would piggyback off that and say visit NAVAvoices.org, which is our website for the National Association of Voice Actors. Pop over to the resources tab and look at some of that AI information there if you want more information. But I too am, and that's my notification to go to that meeting. Yeah, I would say that I too am equally encouraged because I think we have successfully managed to get the message beyond just, oh, artists are scared, and that we are cutting through with the understanding that all of us should be concerned that this it impacts more than just artists, that we might be the canaries in the coal mine as artists, but it's something that everyone should be aware of. And so I think this has been an opportunity for inclusion and not exclusion, where we're all circling the ranks. We're all understanding that, if this is the technology that's going to revolutionize the world, it's not too much to ask that it be done responsibly. And if you are touting this as something that is just world changing, but you don't know what's in the models and the neural networks, you don't know what's in there, like that's irresponsible. And we know we have a responsibility to make sure, children's voices aren't being used in ways that are unethical or weird, and child generated material, which happens, is something that just this world doesn't see. And so I'm encouraged as well, but I think that we have to remain vigilant, and there's a lot of misinformation, and there's a lot of one-sidedness. Every commercial you see, every other commercial is like, hey AI, tell me how to breathe. Like it's just like the most basic like fundamental stuff that every commercial is like, oh, hey AI, tell me how to drive. Like it's just like it's trying to tie us to these systems without any concept of like individuality or just personhood. And so, but I think the consumer is not that dumb. And I think people are going to vote with their dollars. I think we'll see the bubble burst in some effect because everything has a tipping point. And I know AI is like the topic du jour, but I don't think it's as a flash in the pan like uh 3D TVs at home were, when every TV coming out was 3D, like, and that was all the rage, or and then the next year was gone. I don't think it's a flash in the pan like that. I think it's here to stay, but I think it's cresting a bit, and we'll see it balance out in the marketplace too.
Awesome.
Thank
What a
you.
thing.
Thank
Thank
you so
you.
much for your thoughts.
Yeah.
Also, if you have any advice later, I know we're out of time now, but we'd love to learn how we could help bridge that gap, because we're
Yeah.
trying to work on these fundamental models and try and earn the trust back that all these tech companies have totally lost in AI, to try and build a better future towards AI that is ethically sourced in all these ways that we've talked about. So if you have any advice for us, we would love to hear it on another time. But thank you.
I mean, I'd be happy to come back. I'd love to come
Yeah,
back
for
and
sure.
have. This is great. I mean, I love talking about this stuff. I think having this conversation, having these discussions right now is a great first step. It is acknowledging that that there is a way to do this, and that it doesn't have to be done without the involvement of the humans that are creating the art and the content in the first place. It's a great place to start.
Right.
And we're here. It's not, it doesn't have to be in opposition. Just don't stop stealing stuff from us. We won't be continue to be upset. So,
Yeah.
Thank you all again. I have to
Yeah.
jump. So
Yeah. Thank
Yeah,
you.
yeah.
See ya.
Head out, guys. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Awesome. Thank you guys. I'm
Bye.
out of here. I will see y'all later. Have a good one.
See you.